Morning. Just did a short piece on the pandemic, and now I'm going to be talking politics. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to keep on topic because I got my little green friend for the evening, but I will try. And after that, I may play some simulator. I do not know. But if I make any of the ones that are known to the people, then then I will actually make a new broadcast at that point. I am keeping an eye on the Ukrainian situation, mostly because Russia is a very large, very looming neighbor for us. On the good times, it's a very good neighbor. On the bad times, it's well known that they won't protect us. So we can be friends with a parent who doesn't protect us. So this was very interesting. It's nice that they're still updating Stellaris. It's like, what, near 10 years old now? They're still making like almost monthly updates. That's the kind of game developer I want to be. Getting a single project and really working at it until it's frank perfect and then moving to the next one. It's what I really want to do. And making it the most moddable game that I can make. That is super important. So that you can look at what I'm projecting the game will do and go like, that's just that and that and that, and then tuning it into your settings and then releasing it as your version. So you don't have to believe my version. I'm just presenting my version. And I'm thinking, because we can't fix the stroke fatality rate, lifespan is still increasing, but in the master's model, but most causes of death are going down except for stroke, and stroke is going up rather sharply, and so is addiction rate. But life expectancy is actually going up as well. So the totalized effect seems to be that people are gravitating towards a single, what can be described as our old age, because we're talking about 88 as the average lifespan. It's very, very, very slowly increasing as technology increases. And I don't believe we have many people who actually live to be the 88 at the moment, because we took a country where the average life expectancy was around 60 and did a radical budget reform, which allowed us to actually pay for a healthcare system. And with the healthcare system we have, the expected age of death is now, or life expectancy is now about 80, while the population's peak is about 70. So once the main, let's say, spike, not the peak, if you will, of the population reaches 88, the life expectancy might very well be 95. But we're now looking at around 88, I think. We are looking at, because after we realized that even if we have full funding for healthcare, it isn't going to do anything about the stroke fatality. We reduced it to a point where we are trying to see how low we can take the two most expensive healthcare categories while everything else is funded, because healthcare is a huge budget and the most expensive healthcare item is an enormous item. If we can reduce, for example, prescription compensation by 10%, we might very well end up saving 3% of the budget. That's how big it is. It's comparable to that. So we're looking at how low we can take those two categories while all other categories are at maximum. and still see a reduction in most causes of death and an increase in life expectancy. It looks like it's about 50%. So your doctor's visit and your prescriptions will be covered 50%, but things like surgeries will be 100%. So this, I believe, will have a minor controlling effect on the drug epidemic because it will not be, based on prescription opioids, but something more manageable by the police elements in our society. A opioid pandemic caused by prescription opioids is very hard for the police force to actually tackle, but turning over-the-counter cough syrup into methamphetamines or farming a large amount of weed is very easy for the police to apprehend. In fact, if the Finnish police wanted, they could bust 10,000 drug dealers today, but they don't want to. Easily. It would be known as such an overreaction by a Western country to a low-level thing that it would be known as the laughingstock of the world, similar to the 1960s National Guard reactions to the student protests in the US. It would be known for a century as an example of how stupidly overboard you can go. But if they wanted to do it, they could do it, which means it's controlled. The police don't think that it is a worry greater than, say, Fridays Out in terms of what they have to deal with. So, the drug overdose, we're talking about either 0.4 or 0.04% of the population dying from drug overdose and 20% dying from stroke. We're talking about something 1,000 times, as in 4 orders of magnitude, lower than stroke death. So we may have to look at it if it doesn't stabilize at some level and continues to raise forever. But for now, it seems it's acceptable. And so our condition is that child mortality rate, as in neonatal death rate, has to be going down. If it is going down with our funding, then we can stop the funding increase there. Then we will focus on improving things like housing and people below the poverty index, but that requires money, which we will actually be saving quite a lot of with this healthcare reform, which we will then be putting into tax reform. And the only tax we need to, or in fact want to lower, is value added tax. Is value added tax. Ja karamellipopcornia elokuvailtoihin ja muihin sinisiin. No ei, popcornia ja suklaata. Niin, nyt katsotaan sitä, että kuinka matalalle me saadaan toi watti. So we're going to be looking at how low can we go in value added tax by, well, a very tiny portion of it is the healthcare reform, but the reality of how we're going to make the money is by saving enough and having a high interest rate for our domestic savings. It's going to have an influence on inflation because somebody targeted us due to our strong deflationary trend for an inflationary spike. So for a while, our inflation is going to go up. I don't know who it is and I don't care. It's some private bank somewhere who got upset with us. If it was actually somebody resembling the US military, we wouldn't be alive. It's some private stupid bank investment somewhere doing a Banksy move on our economy. Driving up inflation when it was going down like 1 point a year in 3 months from 3% to 13% means that our foreign currency reserve is very easy to buy. It's very cheap to buy. And if they know that we intend to keep our deflationary cycle, even if it does indeed cost us because we'll have to increase the interest rate, then they know that they can buy our foreign reserve if they pump our inflation up first, which is well within the capacity of any average banker to do. So they might intentionally do a pump in Europe. It'll make them rich, but it's not in my domain to go find who it is. It's not interesting. The value-added tax is way, way, way too high. It is causing a lot of problems. Bixby. Good guy. Very, very good thinker. We're thinking we're around 90 to 100 in value-added tax now, which is too high. We're thinking if we keep making about 3% surplus a year with our current ratio, that will keep reducing taxes by about 2% a year of total, which means that we might reduce the value-added tax 1 point every 3 months, which seems roughly fine. We have a couple of times paid off our entire debt except for one debt to Germany. And after we have built some more, some of our debt has been accumulating more, but we are still in a downward trend. Because as long as we are not declaring bankruptcy every 3 months or whatever it is, we actually automatically pay a certain percentage of the debt and the interest back. So even if we can't extra pay it as a budget item, it is already being paid back, and our budget is at a surplus, so we're not worried. 6% debt to GDP. We're thinking of holding on to some of it just to have leverage, but it doesn't seem like I will. It doesn't seem like that. If we have 100% of our yearly budget in foreign currency reserves with an interest rate of, say, 5%, we will be making a lot of money. 5% of our budget with the interest alone. Meaning that if situation does get bad, we don't have to get high interest currency rate loans, but we can actually sell off our currency reserve and live off of that if it's at 100%. If we spend another extra 5% a year to just keep functions at a similar level, then around 20 years will be paid without even taking debt if there happens to be an economic crisis. Assuming 10% total spending would make a dent in said crisis, which may or may not be true. Keeping in mind, it also means that if you lose half your wages, you'll be with the interest rate fuckery at 60% of your wages. Might be just enough to save your ass in a very tight situation, but no more than that. That level, I mean. If Russia and China are stupid enough to take the bait and attack the US now, then US will win. If they wait 10, 20 years, then they will win. If they are truly power-hungry fascists, as you say, they will attack as soon as they are at the same level. If they are truly long-distance nation builders, then they won't attack. If they're long-term strategic thinkers more interested in their nation's lineage instead of their personal lineage, they absolutely won't attack. There's very certain clear points. If if they claim the U.S. Secret Service or somebody like that is provoking them into an attack and they fight defensively while they fight, then you might look at the U.S. as the guilty partner. But it's in the air. If they use any excuse such as the US provoking them to fight all out and do damage to outsider civilians, then they are very, very, very bad. And this generation's East hasn't been evaluated yet. Sometimes they are very good and sometimes they are very bad, just like anybody else. Right now, both sides are being annoying to each other, but that's about it. Their punches to each other are in terms of could you do this better instead of die. So I have lived on this planet long enough to know what it looks like when countries start to punch each other with the intention that one side will die instead of do this better. And there is a difference. They are both very bad to be in, but there is a distinct difference. Right now, Russia in Crimea is essentially the US in Iraq. It's essentially the same thing. Now, US withdrawal from Afghanistan is roughly Chinese withdrawal from the South China Sea, but it is in the same ballpark. So we need to see like counter moves. The fact that it's U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan followed by Ukraine buildup, then I'm a little apprehensive. Then it seems like the East is taking it as a sign of more weakness than they ought. The US is known to play weak to provoke stupid people to attack it. US is very much known for that. They will play the aggressive weakling to give you the idea that you will attack. When they do their military drills, they know absolutely how long and how much effort it will take to defeat you. If you do get into a shooting match with the American continent while you're the Eurasian continent, then historically speaking, your chances aren't very good. Historically speaking, you need a very unified, at least 70, perhaps even more percent of the Eurasian continent on your side, while the American continent is dispersed. If you don't have that, then I wouldn't go for it, because this is gonna be one of those crazy sounding things. But when you first approach this planet, you have two choices: either the large continent or the smaller continent. Now, almost everybody worth anything goes to the large continent first because, and they roam around a little, and if it's acceptable to them, they just find a spot and live there. But if they find something truly to be in need of change and they value something besides the current norm, which often translates into individuality and intelligence, they will seek the opposing landmass because they will start what can be termed as a guerrilla warfare against the ego. So what you fight, if you fight the American continent as the Eurasian continent, is everybody on your planet who is fundamentally opposed to you but doesn't want an open war with you as their starting point. And they have spent their entire time optimizing your system, in that if they get into a war with you, they'll optimize certain areas to prove their worth to you and basically rise through your systems until you become irrelevant, and then they automate you. It's like fighting a Borg. It's not something I would do for fun. The Eurasian continent is one that is so much in terms of fighting with itself that it even looks like a nuclear triangle. One of those nuclear warning signs. It even looks like that. That's how much they fought with each other. It's radioactive. But yeah, for example, if the Chinese or Russians actually get into a shooting war with, in which it is obvious that it is them starting it at the point where their military is at the same strength, but their economy is slightly better, then it will be very obvious that they are evil. If they just build to be larger than you and go like, they're there, and don't like outright attack you or provoke you or be provoked by you, then they will be the good guys. Then the US will be very content to give power over onto them, but it doesn't seem that way. The US is the ego's emergency solution, the fact that it's an idiot.
It collects all the demons into one place and bargains through their leader.
It's very annoying to put it like that, but that is the truth. It was very funny when Obama was the president because being kind of a Muslim, he was essentially Satan. But he was one of the best presidents ever, which is because the country is demon hole. I prefer to use the term demon hole, but it comes from the fact that, for example, our nation is vampires. Poland is horses. It's very easy to distinguish archetypes. Horses because a lot of cocaine. You need cocaine, you go to the Polak. Now, you don't want to buy in a little amount from a Polak. Like, you actually buy from a Polak. Warsaw Pact and such. If NATO was, for example, named Belgium back, because its capital is sometimes in Belgium, I think it might be called, let's say it's called Belgium Pact, for example, and it disbands in, say, the 2050s. Do you have any idea how many hundred years we would associate Belgium with being a military superpower? That's what the Warsaw Pact means. Poland, in terms of images, is, thanks to being called the Warsaw Pact, now basically guaranteed as a hard ass. And the Polish nation fits it very well because when the Christians had finally taken Rome and had all of the western parts of the empire, they ran into the German barbarians, which wouldn't convert to Christianity because Rome. So they essentially went around them and found the easternmost spot where the Germans were and settled there, and that became Poland. Then they had the Germans from all sides, and then converting them was relatively easy. That's roughly what they did. Then they weren't interested in expanding from Poland to the east until they had Germany, and by the time they did that, the Orthodox split had happened, and the Orthodox were essentially Moscow and Novgorod and those guys. So there was no capability to expand east. Then they thought that, well, we still need to expand, and then they went to the New World. They couldn't go to Africa because they knew the people would be better than them in terms of war. So once they had North America, South America, and greater parts of Asia, except for the very hard nations like China and Japan, they went to Africa. Then they took Africa. Then they started to take Japan and China. And now the battle is mostly being waged in certain small parts of South America, large parts of Africa, and Asia, because they're seeking to expand the world dominion. They've mellowed a lot in the past 200 years, but they've been very determined about their expanding everywhere ideology. They've been very determined. They knew after they waged 1,000 years of war with the Arabs in the Crusades, while slowly converting Germany through Poland, that the Arabs would be a hard fight. So instead, they started to expand to places where there didn't seem to be many people. And then when they had those places, they essentially took on the Arabs. That was in the 1800s. because even up until the 1800s, the South African and Arabic tribes were known for making slave raids into Europe, taking a coastal city and taking all the people that looked like they could be worth being slaves and sailing back to Africa and selling them to slavery. So by the 18th century, the US was enough of a power player that it actually engaged the last in quotes of the cross-channel pirates. They managed to like basically subdue them. So that proved that they were more powerful, and then it was just a matter of slow grind. And now it's mostly guerrilla warfare against the one world government, which the US totally isn't, because the US is the demon and the one world government is all the same. So it's the saint's battle against the saint, who it also is. So it's, classical emperor. It's not a person yet, it's a driving ideology. Playing kind of like the freedom aspect to the point of hurting everybody with it. It kind of seems to be the note. For example, if you are no longer in contact with an American, they quite often consider you quite hostile. If I were to randomly go back to my group of friends from Finland like 20 years ago and go like, "Hi, what up, guys?" they would immediately accept me. There would be no question. There has been no true hostility amongst us. But if I were to try to get back to groups of Americans that I've known 20 years ago, it would be very weird. When you separate from a person in the American culture, you tend to consider them trash. It's very often found in our grumpy people, but not the well-to-do people. There are also some weird national attributes I've seen. Americans tend to be rather friendly. They're very hard fighters. They're not as good as they think, but they're very hard fighters. That's because most of Europe has learned to, when somebody bullies you, to not confront them directly. And the US assumes that the Europeans going like, okay, and giving in and moving away means that they've actually gained something, when the European has adjusted how much trade they do with America and the terms in there to gain back exactly what they gave in the upfront. So that causes certain problems.
Europeans have generally learned to avoid conflict. We fought amongst ourselves for a couple of thousand years, and no. We're pretty good at finding out what the other partner wants and then kind of like providing it and stepping out of the way. Whore continent, if you will. Which is why I think the EU, as it currently is a bad idea. Still have a method I think it could be reformed into, but I don't think it will pass. But I'm driving for it's in the discussion. You can feel them discussing and trying. It's strange being such a shared mind instead of a state mind. The idea is to make treaties you can join and leave at any point voluntarily, and make all treaties such, and no treaty is binding for all. The idea is that you can at any point leave any treaty, and you can join any treaty based on if you like it, and then making those treaties available to basically all nations in the world. Like, the European Free Trade Zone requires you to have long list of things, provides you with long list of things, and negotiate through here, and then this has given these countries and parties the benefit of countries and parties' opinion. Then you just read through the entire list and see what treaties you'd want to be in. Like for example, police search assistance in nations when crime is presented through official police channels, Interpol, stuff like that. You could just read through the entire list and agree to which conditions and not, and it would be in a centralized location.
Then we would find the groups of countries that agree to which conditions and name various factions according to them would be all very nice. That's what I believe should be done. Like nations that prohibit the trade of narcotics, for example. We would find an appropriate name for them, and then we would deal with them as such. Trade, for example, would be a good idea. I'm pretty sure such a nation, if it's not directly my nation, would be quite beneficial to trade with. One of the upsides of having a large and thriving narcotics market is that you actually end up finding a lot of medications that you never think you'd find. Because those damn drug addicts try every fucking combination of drugs that you can imagine. And when they are provided, they provide research. And our nation's one of our nation's primary goals is to have a lot of research. We'd prefer to know everything. I mean, in theory. If it is not a military technology or a primarily military application of a technology, it will be patent free. We will patent it and make it public for anybody to use at any time. No intellectual protection. If it is something that is a primarily military weapon, then we will require you to pay us some amount to use it, but that's about it. If it is a primarily military weapon, the Sterling nuclear reactor is not a primarily weapon. The fact that you can weaponize it by putting it into any kind of things that you can put a reactor into is a military application, but because in cars too, it's not a primarily military application. A weapon designed to be shot at somebody to cost them something is a military weapon. We have traded a military technology to the US that we saw the Russians use about 6 months to 2 years after we traded it. Its trade has been, its usage has been relatively low, but it has had some use in very specified police and military operations. It is a weapon that makes you, without a physical track that you can remove, trackable for around 2-3 weeks. You can go to an area and see, this person has been here. It lasts for about 2-3 weeks after you have been hit by such a weapon. It is a very minor radiological weapon. It tags you. Because that radiation remains with you for a while after being tagged, because it sinks into you, you will be for a very specified effective device visible. It will be so minor that it will not be a health concern comparable to a rubber bullet, for example. So it is preferable. Turned out that in some cases of military engagement, just as we were predicting, it was friendly on friendly, because both sides now had the radiological weapons in the field. They could shoot at a contact and then go to the base afterwards and see if they were actually shot at by their own. This caused some political adjustments. I knew that was going to happen, but sometimes turns out that there truly was a faction that was trying to keep people at war in nations, just to keep them training in said nations. So when you actually went through who was firing at who and what and where, it was pretty obvious what was going on. It was pretty easy to calculate certain things. I think that might be the reason why the guy got out of that place. Maybe he figured out that, 20% of your engagements are one of your own group firing at your own group that they particularly hate just to be nut jobs, then perhaps it's time to not put these guys into the field unless it's an emergency. It's not a fighter jet hitting a fighter jet, but Oh, those idiots are on patrol again. Skitters away. Other group fires into the air for 30 minutes. You know what I mean? That's an exaggeration, but there was an effect. So that's one of the weapons we traded. We got a pretty good deal on some US gear afterwards. So that's what we're working on. Biggest Russian thing we've bought is that we have a couple of S300s. We bought them specifically for very high value strategic location defense. They appeared to be the best long distance AA missiles. Now that they have the S500s, we're thinking of, trading these ones back in or turning them for scrap in exchange for getting a couple of S500s. Strictly because they have range. Anything else is of not interest. If it can hit something and at range and it is into the air, then we're very interested. Because in theory is one of the key steps of building an anti-ballistic shield for your country. We need a lot more tech on top of that one, but it's theoretically one of the steps. You can't make a anti-ICBM with a Patriot missile. If you know that the entire air defense maximum altitude is like 30 kilometers, you can make it explode at 3 kilometers. If they know your air defense capability is like 3,000 kilometers straight up and into anybody's airspace, then it's different. Russians tend to build big. So when they do need to make a thing, they usually make a big thing. So when you want the biggest bomb, you usually go with the Russians. When you want price comparable impact level, you most often go with the Americans. There are others who are appearing, but yes, for the most part, you go with the Americans. If you are very poor and you want to outfit a very large force, you go to the black market, which is currently mostly Russia, because it's the one that has the most weapons surplus. If the US loses the economic game to China, which I don't consider likely, but I do consider possible, then the US will be known as the black market for weapons for at least 20 years. They will be selling everything they don't specifically need to keep like a good striking edge against the top superpower, which will be China, but they will no longer be interested in their thing. They're gonna go like, well, that was a fun empire while it lasted. I'm gonna go home. And then taking them on in their territory after their collapse and their let's say the consolidation of their military is fucking idiotic. I took Operation Bagration 2 months prior Germany and signed peace with everybody by giving away all the colonies and disbanding the Axis and so on. And I waited 6 months while consolidating my military as my primary thing. And after that, Soviets attacked me and I managed to fight them to a standstill. But just having like a line of infantry from Königsberg to Romania standing there. They do a little bit push. I find their weakest spot and do an equal distance of push to them. Then I surround their push area and they surround my push area and then we can both look at each other. I'm content. So looking at the US, if it does the same after its empire collapses, you're not going to be able to take them on militarily for at least 50 years. The same is true of Russia. You cannot take them on. They have 4,000 nuclear warheads, you freaking moron. They say something, it's usually true. The same for the US. China is building to being the same kind of power as Russia is, but with their current nuclear buildup strength, it's going to take at least 20 years the current entire Chinese nuclear arsenal the US could take without breaking a sweat. In the MAD, but taking on the Russian 4,000, then I believe no. But taking on the 300 to 500 Chinese, yeah, I believe you could do that. You would still remain US. While conversely, the Chinese couldn't take the 2,500 to 3,000 US nukes. There would be no China afterwards. But the US, after entire anti-ballistic missile usage and the kind of system where we are at now, where they will see absolutely the first second that the Chinese launch, and the fact that the Chinese can get things like their nuclear missile subs in peacetime close to your shore and stuff like that, you'd lose 5 to 20 megacities like LA completely, and 10 similar megacities in part in the sense that a day after the impact, most of their emergency services function, and you would retain 75 to 80% of your industrial capacity after 1 year. Your GDP would, of course, be nominal, but your actual industrial capacity would be fairly unaffected. You would lose 20 to 25 million people. But in terms of like MAD outcomes, you take on the Russian 4,000 and you're going to lose out of your 320 million, 315 million. Cautiously. Because the whole planet is going to go to such a nuclear winter that there's no farming, for example, for 5 years. That's the level of nuclear winter. So you're going to lose. But if you take on the entire Chinese nuclear force and do MAD on them without destroying the entire planetary atmosphere, which is what the Russian-US war would look like, then I believe you might be able to come out with 25 to 30 million fatalities. That rests on the fact that in your limited exchange, South American and African farming will be fairly unaffected. Europe and Russia will be absolutely fucked. Absolutely fucked. But the US has enough spare agricultural land that it might be able to survive. You could talk about something similar to a container ship a year per harbor in about 2 or 3 years, maybe 5. But that requires entirely that the planet does not go through global cooling nuclear winter. If the exchange is hard enough, and that it can only be if you strike back hard enough, then there will be nuclear winter. Because the entire Chinese nuclear arsenal cannot, even if they target everybody, create a nuclear winter. But your 3,000 in retaliation, if used entirely, will generate a nuclear winter. That's what they can do. Therefore, maximum retaliation in such a scenario will produce death. There are several such scenarios in the world at play at the moment. Awareness of them is helpful. You are playing your opponent to the point where if they attack you, you both die. Can be termed the Littleville offense, which is why your military often takes that form. But enough of that. I'm not gonna comment on your current ads of trans women. Except that we're definitely seeing Scarlett laughing at you. Mä en menis tonne päinkään. Mä en menis sinne päinkään nyt. Great. Ei kun oikeesti. Tunnet sä yhtään vittu kansalaista? Oho jää nyt. Olenpa ihan hiljaa nyt. Mä vaan sanon, että jos meillä olisi teknologia, jolla pystyisi vaihtamaan sukupuolta täysin saumattomasti, niin mä olisin täysin varmasti jonkun aikaa nainen.
jos se olisi semmoinen, että se onnistuisi täysin orgaanisesti, niin kokeilisin kaikki sukupuolet ja ihan värit ja iät ja kaikki. Millä sen paremmin sitten tietäisi, että millaisia ihmiset on. Siitä vähän ymmärtäisi, kun niiden kanssa puhuu, että mihin niin kuin suuntaan pitäisi sillä olla, että olisi oikeasti siltä puolella luonnollinen. Tietäisi kaikista sen. Se olisi ihan vitu uskomattoman hyvä juttu. Mutta se on sitten joskus. Se voi viedä ihan niin pitkälle tai niin lyhyen kuin itse haluaa. Se voi tehdä sillä, että vetää itsensä vaikka ihan täysin joksikin vanhaksi tummaksi mieheksi ja kävelee kerran kauppaan ja takaisin. Näkis sen, että mitä ne kohtelee. Sitten pistäisi esimerkiksi jonkun oikein hyvän näköisen mimmin ja tekisi saman reissun uusiksi. Sitten katsoo sitten millaiset ihmiset vaan on. Se olisi aika mahtavaa. Sen takia mä veikkaan, että ne on aika mielenkiintoisia tapauksia. Sitten mä haluan tohon mitään. Nyt katsomaan, kun mä pelaan Marshmallowia. Sitä en varmasti podcastaa kuule. Ei, kun se kuuluu ihan hygieniaverkon taakse. Se on isoin asekoin, minkä mä oon tehnyt, ja sen mä oon tehnyt kummatkin kerrat sillä lailla, että mä oon ilmoittanut etukäteen sille laivan komentajalle, että mä joudun iskemään tällä. Meillä on ollut hyvin tarkka semmoinen, että me ollaan seurattu semmoista UAP-fenomenaa sillä lailla, että mä oon sanonut, että mun pitää toimia sen mukaan sieltä. Ollaan päästy hyvin ihmeellisiä asemiin. Voi jossain vaiheessa lähteä miettimään, että jos niillä asemilla jopa tekisi jotain, niin nyt me vaan katsotaan niitä asemia. Ei oikein kiinnosta. Kun jos sä teet niin, että sä kytkeet jonkun taikavoiman johonkin fantasiaan, jos on joku vastapeli, joka myös on sen fantasian sisällä ja se vastaa sulle se taikavoima, niin silloin se oikeakin on vastaamassa. Sillä sä pystyt todistamaan, että se oikea on vastaamassa. Kun sä saat sen vastapuolen tekemään jotain näkyvää, mitä ne muut pystyy huomaamaan. Siihen se knock-knock-fenomena on ihan täydellinen. Se on ihan täydellinen siihen. Sitten kun on ihan pakko, niin sitten mennään keskelle jotain julkista tilaa vähän istumaan ja katsotaan pienikäyöä. Ja se mitä se tehdään. Muuten on ihan turha lähteä puhumaan mitään. Sitä vaikka se kadulla oleminen oli ihan vitun paras kokemus ikinä. Siellä oli muutamia semmosia juttuja, niin kuin se, kun mä aloin tekemään sitä deadback-toimintaa, että se oli kyllä semmoinen aika, että ei mitään. Rahaa velisi niin, että siinä ei kenelläkään käsitystä vieläkään, että kuka teki mitäkin juttuja. Kun ne alkoi käyttämään sitä, että mun läpi pystyi tekemään niitä rahasiirtoja. Mulla on semmoinen, että tässä on tää puoli ja sitten tässä on tää puoli ja sitten täältä kävelet tonne ja tuolla näkyy sitten joku, joka vie sut eteenpäin ja sun pitää olla sen ja sen näköinen laukku mukana ja sitten istuu vaan julkisella paikalla. Ja yleensä on sillä, että yksi ehkä 2-30 kantaa semmoista isoa duffelbagia, niin sitten saattaa tehdä sitä spelliä ja siinä menee 10 minuutin aikana joku 300 duffelbagia edestakaisin. Se oli ihan vittu semmoinen, että joo vittu. Toi networthin arvio on aika mielenkiintoinen. Noin paljon se sanoo, että mulla on ollut nyt viimeiset 2 kuukautta. Se on pitänyt tasaisena sitä aika korkealla. Se on löytänyt jotain se kattoja, että mistä se on sitä mieltä, että nyt tulee tasaisesti. Mä yritän vähän pitää tuolla tasaisena nyt tällä hetkellä. Se on joku semmonen, joka on tottunut haistamaan siellä viranomaispuolella, niin sen, että kuinka iso rahasumma sulla on sen perusteella, että millainen se on. Ja sit se on huomannut mut yksilönä ja sit se on tehnyt siitä se arvionsa. Se haistelee aina välillä ja katsoo, että mitä se näkee. Se tähtää siihen, että jos se osuu siihen, mitä mulla on, ja mä saan sitten ne rahat, niin sitten se saa sen vastapalveluksen kunnianosoituksen siitä, että se oli ensimmäinen, joka se ennusti, jos se osuu siihen oikeaan summaan. Niin sitten sille tulee 10 asiakasta, ja sitten se voi sanoa niille, että mä haluan 10% sun tuloista, ja se tekee sen. Ja sitten sillä 10% siitä, mitä sieltä löytyy esimerkiksi. Sitten jos mä saan sen itselleni käsiin, niin sitten mä teen nämä kaikki mun tutkimustyöt ja kaikki mitä mä sanon. Se UFO mä valmistan heti, jos mä saan joku 50 miljoonaa. Se on ihan saletti juttu. Vedenalainen yhden menevä mihin tahansa suuntaan vapaasti liikkuva. Mä itse asiassa näytän. Tulee paremmin näin nyt kerran ollaan tässä. Vieläkin 32. Käväs 33. Mitäs näistä se olisi paras? Tämmösen mä laitan sit heti, kun mulla on hiljaa. Toi on ihan tyhmää, että toi poistu toi dislike-nappu, se hyvin tosi. Tämmönen. Se on musta kaasupallo pohjassa ja jokaisen välistä tämmöset työntimet sit päällä tämmönen kansi ja sit siihen hissa. Sitten sen kannen saa paineisteet tuli ja sit sen saa vedellä täytettyä, kun menee veden alle. Et sillä voi mennä niinku veden alle ja sit sinne tulee vettä sille. Sitten sinne sisälle laittaa sillä lailla, että sinne saa 4 ihmiselle, jos laittaa oikein tunkemalla, niin makuutilat. Sen kokoinen se on. Silloin 2 sillä lailla, että kummatkin saa kuitenkin niin kuin ihan sillä lailla mukavat olot ja niille kaikille 4 on kuitenkin oma sänky, ettei puhuta vielä mistään militaarityönnöstä, kun sitten olisi ainakin 8 ihmistä saa. Asumatilaa pitäisi saada ainakin joku 35-45 kuutiometriä. 30kin olisi harjoa. Idea on se, että siinä pystyisi sen takia, kun se reaktori on nyt kehitetty, siinä meni aikaa, kun mä sitä kehitin, mutta saimme sen valmiiksi, niin sillä reaktorilla niin vetyä ja sit sitä ydinkäyttöistä energiaa niin pystyisi menemään veden alla niin oikeastaan infiniteetäisyyden. Syvyydeksi mä ajattelin sitä, että pääsisi ihan vähän thermoclinein alapuolelle, joku 90-150 olisi hyvä. Niin sit pääsis sen alapuolelle, missä on tämä kylmä ja lämpimä meriveden raja, niin siinä tapahtuu semmoinen tilamuutos, että sua ei näe esimerkiksi tutkalla helposti. Tai niin kuin tuolla sonarilla. Niin sitten, jos sä oot sen yläpuolella, niin sut yleensä näkee sonarilla ihan helposti, kun se vesimassa siinä ympärillä tekee jotain siinä alueella, mikä ei tee. Sitten jos sä menet sen alapuolelle, niin se vesimassa on semmoista, että siellä ei tosissaankaan mikään tee mitään missään vaiheessa, kun se ei liiku se vesi. Se on vaan semmoinen tasainen litku. Siellä on jotain semmoisia pitkiä merivesityöntöjä, mutta melkein mitään muuta siellä ei ole. Ja sit ihan vitu isoja alaita ja tämmöisiä ihan vitusta. Joidenkin arvioiden mukaan isoimmat mustekalat tai ne mitä vittu onkaan, niin mitä meidän merestä pitäisi löytyä, kalamari se taitaa olla nimeltään, niin pitäisi olla 60 jalkaa pitkä. Se on tämän hetken korkein, mitä me ollaan kuultu. Sillä että mitä pitäisi olla, jos sä mietit, että semmoinen vetää johonkin purjeveneen ympärille itsensä ja alkaa oikein häiritsemään sitä, niin kyllähän sitä aikamoista jälkeä tekee. Mutta se ei ole mikään pikkuinen otus vettä. Se ei ole mikään pikkuinen. Se on tehty sillä lailla, että on katsottu kuinka iso on isoimman, mitä me ollaan löydetty. Semmoisen kalamarin se suujuttu, kun se kasvaa sen iän myötä. Ja sitten katsottu vashaantuneiden ja muiden veilien vatsasta, mitä me ollaan löydetty, niin isoin vastaavan kokoinen, että me voidaan päätellä, että minkä ikäisiä niitä on. Niin isoimmat, mitä me ollaan löydetty, niin ei ole jotain 20 fiittiä, mutta valaiden vatsasta on löydetty 60 fiittiä. Se tarkoittaa sitä, että niitä voi kasvaa vielä senkin yli semmoiseksi, mitä ne valaat ei enää pysty vetämään, mutta se mitä me tiedetään, että valaat vielä pystyy vetämään, niin ainakin 60 jalkaa. Semmoinen 100 jalkaa voisi mun mielestä vielä mennä ihan meidän merissä ilman, että se olisi mitenkään karkaantunut. Se ei ole mitenkään semmoinen. Sitten jos semmoinen ottaa siitä sun aluksesta kiinni, niin se on vaan vikinää, sä et voi mitään. Mä oon miettinyt, että jos siihen alkaa fittaamaan runkoa jotain aseita, niin se on semmoinen signaali, että ei vittu mitään. Jos mä fittaan siihen vaikka 20 jotain 50 kaliberista sitä varten, että jos joku valas oikeasti alkaa pureskelemaan mua, että mä pääsen vielä pinnallekin sieltä, niin on se nyt vähän sillä, että joo, ei se nyt ehkä mikään optimi ole. Mä oon suunnitellut sen niin, että se pitäisi periaatteessa tulla yhdelläkin semmoisella kuplalla ylös ja sitten sillä pystyy niinku laskeutumaan tällainen johonkin niinku mannerlaatan pintaan ja sitten tasapainotella niillä kuplilla sillä, että se pysyy tasaisena se runko koko ajan. Pienentää ja paisuttaa niitä sen mukaan, niin se pohjaa. Sitten sen paineistettu ilmaa, niin vedät sinne sukelluspuvun päälle ja paineistat sen sitten vedellä ja avaat. Uiskentelet ympyrää ja katselet mitä löytyy ja sitten uiskentelet takaisin sisälle ja sitten paineistat sinne takaisin pois. Se on niinku ihan mun optimi. Mä en ole niin kauhean sit syvän meren sukelluksesta, sillä se ei ole mulle mikään semmoinen oikein juttu. Kyllä mä niin se haluan tehdä, mutta ei se mikään semmoinen tärkeä. Se mikä siinä on tärkeä, niin on se, että sillä pystyy meren alla tulee ulos sieltä. Ja turvallisuussyistä. Sitten mä ensimmäiset pari vuotta vetelen sillä korkeintaan jossain Baltian meressä tai jossain järvessä, sillä testaan kaikki sähköt ja kaikki. Mä teen sen ihan sitten joskus, jos mä saan rahat. On mulla suunnitelmia, että mitä mä ne hillat tekisin, mutta ne on ihan yhteen. Ei kukaan keskivertokansalainen ala tekee 3 miljoonaa kuitenkaan. Mä voin tehdä ton tollaan, että mulla on valmiina toi presentaatio ja sit jos joku jossain Shark Tankissa on sillä että vähän siisti juttu, niin voihan sieltä jotain tulla, mutta en mä tiedä oikeasti usko. Ei tää yhteiskunta tue keksijöitä sillain. No on sellainen, että ne on ihmisillä vähän niin kuin yhtä kanssa. Sitten jos mä saan tämän mun elämäni joskus semmoisen kuosin, että mä pystyn taas noita teknologiajuttuja ostamaan, niin kuin esimerkiksi kaikkia tietokoneita sillä, että menee kaikki elähtällä voimalla, mitä nyt joutuu sen päihteelle. Niin sit mä saatan alkaa jopa vähän katsomaan sitä, että mä maksaisin jotain alustavia tutkimuskuluja siitä UFOsta. Pyytäisin vaikka joku firman tekee arvio, että paljon semmoinen kustantaisi maksaa, eteen vähän jotain white paperia ja sitten mä mahdollisesti lähestyn jotain rahoittajan näköistä. Se, mitä mieltä oot, mulla on tämmöinen, mulla on kaikki patentit ja suunnitelmat ja mä oon lähettänyt firmalle ensimmäisen kerran, että tuossa niiden arvio, että paljon maksaa tehdä yksi tämmöinen. Mulla olisi semmoinen visio, että jos me saataisiin näitä vaikka 10 myytyä vuodessa, niin siinä tekisi jo omat kaikki kulunsa takaisin kevyesti kummallekin jotain sillä voittaa. Se olisi, jos niitä saisi niin 10 menee vuodessa, niin se olisi semmoinen, että sitä voisi sanoa, että se on myyntituote. Sitten kun se on se ensimmäinen, kun siitä joutuu todennäköisesti valmistamaan semmoisen ihan mikroversion, testiversioksi, mihin pystyy astumaan sisälle ja siinä on kaikki ne prototyypit, niin se ei välttämättä ole kuin muutama 100 tonttua, niin sitten kun se on valmis, niin sillä voi antaa ihmisille kaikkia toureja, että miten se niin toimii ja sillä voi kerätä sitä rahoitusta. Mutta kun toi taas mulle sit, jos ton tekee kokonaan tollain, niin kuulostaa vähän duunilta, niin mä oon vähän sillä että joo. Niin pitää aloittaa silloin jostain pienestä nakertamaan sitä kulmaa. Ja kun toi idea tuli siinä vaiheessa, kun oli jo ihan selvää, että homma lähtee latasesta päihtelyn takia. Niin nyt mä laskin sen mukaan, että jos pääsisi silleen, että pystyisi maksattaa omat päihteet sillä päihteilyllä, niin saisi ne omat rahat, mitä näistä eläkkeistä, sossuista näistä tulee, niin käytettyä sit siihen, että tekisi näitä varsinaisia työjuttuja, niin saa niin tähtää. Mutta sitten taas kun ne luottotiedot jysähti, niin kämpää ei oikein silloin saa, niin ei silloin oikein pystynyt kasvattaa, niin nyt mä oon ensimmäistä kertaa yrittämässä. Siitä vähän tuu treidaamaan, mua voisi vähän päädytty kiinnostaa. Jos se on oikeasti niin paljon kiinnostaa tuhota ja taas demokraagis, niin siitä vaan. Että Mä lasken tuolla Madagaskarissa vielä tälläkin hetkellä sen koko ajan, että mitä kaikkia tekoja mä teen, että mitä valtio mä edustan. Ja mitä kaikkea. Mä oon siellä local municipality-päätöksessä noista asioissa. Mä oon siinä kannalla. Tarkoittaa sitä, että keskusvaltio ei anna viedä laajamittaisesti ulkomaille, eikä oikeastaan kiinnosta kauheasti myöskään kieltä. Paikallishallinto päättää. Se on mun mielestä kaikista järkevää. Ei sitä voi keskushallinto tuollaisen asian sanoa. Se on vähän semmoinen, että onko sulla pubisia kaupungissa sitten kysymys. Ei se oikein keskushallinnon asia. Jos mä katson sitä tuommoisena, joka pelaa SimCitya, niin se päätös siirtyy siihen paikallishallintoon tarkoittaa sitä, että siellä on uusi sellainen talo, jonka sä voit rakentaa. Tai uusi politiikka, jonka sä voit laittaa. Siitä se mun mielestä tarkoittaa. Sitten jos valtio sanoo, että rakennat toi rakentamatta, niin mä oon vähän sillä että joo. Siis silloin, että sanoo, että rakennat niitä, että tuokin vaatii niin jotain vastaanottokeskuksia tai rakentamatta niitä tuokin vaatii niin jotain natsien nuorisoleireiltä. Mä aina silloin, kun valtio sanoo kaikille semmoinen, että kaikkien pitää tehdä niin hyvin sillä, että miksi perustella. Sitten jos teitä nyt sattuu kiinnostaa, niin semmoinen. Mä keitin ton Sterling Wolframin sitä UFOa varten. Tarvittiin siihen semmoisen, joka tasaisesti tuottaa sen sähköä. Tutkin kaukaa ja pitkään, että mistä se voisi tulla se semmoinen. Ja siitä tuli väläyksenä, että nämä. Katoin, että mikä oli polttomoottoria tehottomampi, mikä hävisi polttomoottorilla, ja se oli toi. Ja sitten mä mietin sillä, että hetkinen, ei ole tuohon aikaan uraania ollenkaan. Kun uraani joutuu nykykäytöllä, niin pyörittää semmoisen paineista kuin vesiputkella. Nyt sen pystyy tekemään tollaan. Ja sitten mä teen tollasen mun reaktorin. No se UFO. Sitten mä tein ton kartan, että mä sain sen tekoälyn. Nyt mä tiedän, että mitä mä teen sen tekoälyn ja mitä mä teen sen moottorin. Niin mulla on nyt flight computer ja sitten energy system. Alien alloyssia ei ole vielä, kun mä en ole ihan varma, että mistä mä teen sen homman. Mä voisin tehdä sen jostain monimutkaisesta komposiitista, mutta mä tiedän, että jos mä teen sen sillä, että mä itse sen suunnittelen, niin hinnaksi tulee ihan vitun monta. Se voisi tehdä sillä, että olisi deluxe, sitten olisi normaali versio ja sitten olisi se, millä me esitetään sen budjetti, se, niin se prototype. Se olisi sillä tehty. Mutta niin kuin mä oon sanonut, niin jos mä saan täältä nämä 13 miljoonaa joku päivä itselleni, niin sitten mä kyllä rakennan UFO heti ensimmäisenä minuuttina. Sitten ei ole mitään kysymystä. Joo, tää on tällä sipuli. Mä menen tekemään jotain muuta. Kiitoksia.